Oh, there she is. Okay, good.
I'm here.
Live.
Oh, shoot. Hey, Millie,
Jesus.
Yes, yes.
by chance, and this may be my fault, did you say it, the superintendent of school wanted the link? Did you send him the link by
I
chance?
did not, and I thought that was you. You had asked me that you said you were going to give him a call, and that I didn't need to. do that.
Yeah. Can you forward the link and I'll just text him and let him know?
I sure can. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't remember if I sent it to him or not. But let me text him right now.
Hey,
I'm-
Millie?
Oh, he's here.
Yes.
All right.
And this is my fault. Did you say it, superintendent of school?
Yes.
We're picking up somebody's YouTube.
Yeah, that's Mike. I'm pretty sure that's him. I think he called in. Quickly. All right, so I just text him, see if he wants the link. I can send the link to him too.
Doing that right now, Marianne.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, he said he needs to call in, so I think we're all set.
Sending him a call invite as well.
Am I muted?
So I think we probably should start. What do you think, Millie, if you sent it to him?
Yeah, we've sent him a couple of different ways, and he'll be popping in.
He'll figure it out. Yeah,
Any minute. Okay.
and he was on earlier. He was on and then he went off, so he was on via phone.
All right. Want me to start?
Yeah, I think you can.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the New Shum Town Council agenda for Wednesday, March 10th, 2021. The New Shum Town Council is meeting via telecommunications pursuant to State of Rhode Island Executive Order 20-46 dated June 12th, 2020. To participate and raise your hand on your phone, you would press *9 and you mute and unmute by pressing *6. So with that being said, we have one item on the agenda today, and it is discuss capital needs, priorities, and expenditures. I will let Mary Ann and staff take over.
Okay. Oops, I just realized I wasn't here. Okay, great. God, that plane sounds close. I'll start and then.
Sounds too close here.
I'm sorry?
It's going over my house right now.
Yeah. I'll start and then I'm sure Amy's going to jump in and take over some of the dialogue. So as I understand it, the council had requested a preliminary meeting regarding current debt and potential long-term debt prior to the start of what we're calling our full-fledged budget season, which starts just on Monday of next week. Budget by charter is due to the council by Monday of next week. You have a few documents that Amy had put together and worked on that was included in your packet. One, and I'm not sure what order you folks have these documents in, but once I start chatting about them, you figure out. One document you have is what is called the 5-year capital budget. I like to call it a 5-year capital plan. This document, I tell all folks, all elected officials, when I'm introducing this capital budget or capital plan, that it's just that. It is a planning document. The numbers, the years, and the amounts are subject to change as we go forward through this capital plan. The numbers and amounts in the first couple of years are usually pretty good, but again, it's not until we finalize some plans, we go out to bid, that these amounts may change, these amounts may shift. All funding will be determined based on the timeline that is presented before you. Some of the items here that may change the timeline is some funding mechanisms that may come up prior to about something that we want to, prior to some long-term project that is in the plan. For instance, it could be USDA funding, which we've seen with the bond issue, with broadband and other projects, sewer and water projects in particular. Also TIP, that is usually state funding. It relates to road and sidewalks. The West Side sidewalk was a TIP funding. Also RIDE, Rhode Island Department of Education, provides housing funds for school projects. A couple of years ago, there was a bond issue before the voters where $250 million was approved for school projects. And currently we have a 35% reimbursement. However, with this latest funding mechanism that was approved by the voters for the state of Rhode Island, there are some incentives to get additional reimbursement for the town of New Shore. So the funding of these projects may change how we move about and how we go forward with some of these projects. So that's the 5-year capital plan. We can get into that more details. You also have 2 graphs that have been presented to you. The first graph includes debt that has been issued, and the documents are color coded. The second graph is similar. However, it includes what we call bonds authorized but not issued. A bond that has been authorized is the $8 million broadband project. That debt hasn't been issued, so that is not included in the graph that says just authorized general obligation debt. That is not included. The second graph does include such things as the $8 million bond issue for broadband. And the second document, or I guess the final document that I want to speak about is specifically, it's called the proposed, it's the current ordinance, and it's capital improvement ordinance. There's some proposed changes to this ordinance. It's my understanding after discussion with Amy that about a couple of years ago, the council working with the prior town manager looked at this ordinance and thought it would be best to amend this ordinance and take the capital budgeting process and have the town manager be more the lead on that process. Prior to that, it was the planning commission working with department heads. The proposed, and also there's obviously some dollar amount changes, and also from 10 years to 5 years, 3 years up to 5 years, which I agree with. 3 years is too short, 5 years is more reasonable. So what happened this year is capital budget requests were sent out to all the department heads, and also, the fire department, also the medical center. So we include some of our other stakeholders and agencies. They were submitted to myself and Amy. We met with everyone to discuss it. And then that's why we have the 5-year capital that's before you right now. What we'll do is, as we start going through this process, we will then, as required by the ordinance, we will include the planning commission in our discussion, because they need to look at it, review the capital plan, and make sure that we are complying with the town's comprehensive plan as it relates to the capital budget. So that is an overview that I thought I'd provide you folks with. It's about a $50,000 foot overview. We would probably get, if you want to get more into the weeds today, we can. That's up to you. So at this point, I'll turn it back over to Andre, or if you want to just punt it to Amy at this point, we can do that.
Can I just ask a quick question, Andre or Marianne? Because I personally, I actually don't want to be in the weeds. I want to sort
Okay.
of, my question really came from, as I said in my email, really wanting to develop an understanding of kind of how we establish what our priorities are. How we, when we establish a priority, how do we operationalize that? How do we get from point A to point B in what, everybody acknowledges is a challenging construction environment that we have on the island. By the way, the written material is terrific. It's so great to look through and kind of get a picture from the spreadsheet to the graph to all that. But what I'm wondering is how we, not just as a council, but as a community, decide, yeah, absolutely, our number one priority over the next 5 years is to, do renovations at the Block Island School and build a new fire and rescue building. I'm just literally sort of making stuff up. But how do we decide that? And when we decide that, do we sort of how do we go hard at those goals so that they're achieved, as quickly as possible? Because I think certainly we have an interest rate environment right now that invites the kind of infrastructure investment that a lot of these, sort of the umbrella that a lot of these projects fall under. And then how do we leave room for a major capital expenditure that was unanticipated, that is opportunistic? We've talked a little bit about those over months, that's really where I was coming from on this. I mean, I think when we have these major capital projects, as a person on the town council, I want to be in a position to passionately advocate for them at the financial town meeting. And the thing that gets me there is understanding that the ideas have been fully vetted, are readily executable, and make financial sense. What happened? Is there? Oh, it's an helicopter.
Yeah, no, it seems to be a flight.
Did the aliens come?
Yeah, comment.
I see Amy going, oh my God. Looks like they were coming down.
I just saw
down the chimney.
three black helicopters.
So let me take a crack at it, and Amy, please jump in, and hopefully I got all these questions down. So how do you get from point A to point B? The capital plan is the good starting point, because as I said, the town manager makes requests out to staff. Amy and I do not know all the infrastructure needs. We don't know all the capital needs. That's why we rely on staff. And as I've said to you folks before, we have some great staff. And based on that information they provide us with, Amy and I we have a conversation, and we have the conversation with staff. For instance, Mike Shea came forward and said he needs a new dump truck and a smaller pickup truck. So we start talking to him. Can you wait another year for this? When is it best to do that? So that starts the dialogue. And based on that, we start putting this capital plan together. The fire department has mentioned on a couple of occasions and discussing that they think it's time that we visit the capital, the fire bond. Let's call it the fire bond. So I said to them, I said, do you have an idea how much that's going to cost? And we think it's ballpark between 6 and 10 million. So we put 8 million. As we go through the next few years and where this is in the capital budget, we will then start firming up those numbers. Maybe we'll come back to you and said, can we have an architect, to someone to design a building? And once you get the design done, then you can start putting numbers to it. The school goes through the same process. The school also has another process that they need to go through. In order to get the 35%, let's call it housing aid, and that's based on principal and interest that they reimburse us for, they have to have an approved 5-year facilities plan. And to do that, they have to go through an application process. They have to submit a letter of intent. Once the letter of intent is submitted, they need to go through a stage 1 application. Once RIDE approves the stage 1 application, they need to submit a stage 2 application. And I won't get into a lot of details with that. There's timelines, there's dates as to when that's all approved. So the school comes also working with Mike. He presented his plan to us. We also know there was this funding mechanism is available. So a year ago or 2 years ago, you may not have seen the school's funding that they're requesting. And the reason being, like I just stated, something may happen that would make something right to move it along. And a lot of this is policy decision.
Or something
as to what we
or
would,
something bad may happen, the one.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, well, correct. So also, and this is where I'll punt it to Amy, because each community is a little different. Whether you approve the bond issue, some communities do it at a financial town meeting. Some communities only approved bonds at a general election or a special election. The town here has done it as financial town meetings, and this is where I'm going to punt to Amy as to how we've done it in previous years as it relates to financial town meetings. It's the approval process that we go through. The actual issuing the bonds, we have bond counsel, we have financial advisors we work with, so they help us through those process and when time's right. But if something comes up in the middle, I think what we do is it would come forward if it's not already on the capital plan, then we would look to have a special financial town meeting or something. So Amy, why don't you run with that part of it?
Sure. And those of you who have been around for a while, I hopefully will agree with this assessment of the approach, which is even with the best planning and the things that have been on the list for years, if it's a big enough project, it tends to stand at a special town meeting because the timing hasn't necessarily aligned for the May meeting, or because it needs that unique attention. I'm thinking of the school, the town hall in its phases was often at a special meeting. Mm-hmm. Things that are a little more operational tend to be in May, and they're a little more cursory, I would say, that it's assumed that they're going to pass. And it really gets to a lot of times the understanding of whether it's a subjective item. Is it something that we have a choice about whether we do or not? Or is this something that's an obligation of our community and therefore we're going to do it regardless? That tends to shape whether it's on cycle or off cycle. But the big projects either way tend to stand by themselves. I think that sort of defines how things have worked recently. Very rarely do we have a big question at a regular meeting. It happened in July with broadband. That was almost a broadband meeting that had a financial town meeting with it. And that was such an unusual set of circumstances anyway.
Where does the policy conversation come into it? One of the things that occurs to me is Sven and Mark have both talked recently, actually, since December about, say, composting being a priority. And that's not in any of the capital plans, but that may well be a policy priority. And how does that work where it's it's generated either by members of the community or members of the council, or and it's sort of not the fire truck and dump truck, but kind of policy initiatives that would require a capital spend.
Andre, may I?
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
Or Marianne? That's
Feel free, Amy.
I'm just going to talk.
Don't be shy.
And that's where
You got two us presenting a budget, and you got two people who just loves getting into this stuff. So you may have to reel us both in at some point in time.
that's where I would say this capital plan in front of you today, this is not always the case, but as it stands today, is much more of a request-driven document. It very much originates out of what the departments have identified as their needs. It doesn't have that other side to it, which is the the vision and policy of the council or the planning board. It doesn't have that influence, and that influence isn't always direct. Sometimes it's just hearing and aggregating the conversations of a priority of the council over time.
Marianne, can I jump in for a second?
Yeah.
And having been on the planning board for many years, and Amy sat in many of those meetings, and it's a relatively small group here, those were incredibly frustrating. They were not vision driven. They were not policy per se. And I think, and actually the current process is a recommendation out of the planning board that they sort of got out of it. I think now this is working much better. And Keith, to your point, I think this is when we have that policy discussion. There are actually some numbers here. There's a number missing somewhere, or there's a line item missing. That's a good discussion. And I think this is where, having policy before we have numbers, I don't want to say it's a lot of BS, but it quickly gets to BS. Having numbers without listening to policy gets to be bottom up, no vision. And so I do think this is the time for it. And here, what I believe this document does is incredibly well for 8 years, lays out, here are some departments, and obviously Amy and Marianne, who put a lot of work into this, they're saying, hey, here's where the stuff bubbles up. So there's a $30 million, whatever the real number is, bubble up from, obviously school and fire is pretty big here. Housing's pretty big here. I mean, there's some obvious bubbles. And I think as we work through this over the next hour and next days, this to me is almost more important than a lot of the details that'll come through, because now we're prioritizing. And when somebody says, oh, where's my pool? Well, sorry, that didn't make it. And that line item, we can maybe have a line items at the bottom to say didn't make it. But I think this is a really important time.
So to piggyback on what Amy said, and also to just mention something else. I was on a phone conversation with Sean from the transfer station, and Sam was with me. And if you look at 2025, it does say construct transfer station facility of $2 million. This is a project that the council, working with staff, may want to move it up a little bit. The conversation that I had with Sean and Sam at that point, we got talking about the facility and some infrastructure with the facility that needs some be repaired. Then the conversation led towards maybe we need to do a major upgrade renovation to the transfer station to include composting. And then the conversation said, well, if we're going to do that, I think we need to look at the whole operational piece of the transfer station, because there's some safety concerns. And I usually don't go to the transfer station because it's not my job in my house. But recently I had to go to the transfer station because it became my job for a few weeks. And what I saw was, and when I do these things, keep in mind, I always look at things differently now that I'm the town manager. You know, we put all, my son was with me, we put all the recycling stuff in. I said, okay, where does the trash go? We go across. We have people and cars going across and stuff like that. That's the safety piece that I was concerned, and that's what I mentioned to Sean. So what I like to do whenever we're looking at something for, like when we said construct a transfer station facility, we will now start that dialogue as it relates to composting. What will be the requirements to include composting? What can we do to improve the operation of that facility and the efficiency of that facility? We have something slated for 2025. Maybe as we discuss this in the coming weeks, the council may decide or may suggest that we move that. Maybe we look to do that in 2024 or 2023. And that's how things get moved and changed based on ongoing continuing discussion with the council each year.
So, for example, if we were talking about, a new public safety structure, whether that's just for fire and police, we could, one of the things that that I think that project is important to the town, but it may well become more important if, for example, it includes housing. We all talk about housing for town employees, and maybe the most efficient, the most efficient thing to do is to move that up and have it include housing, for example, or any of these, a lot of these include that component.
When we talk about the fire department, when I had met with them and discussed with them, we also discussed that housing would be included in the facility, especially for the volunteers, because we want to keep some of our younger volunteers on the island. So that discussion happened. When you see these numbers, you're not seeing a lot of the details. But
Sure.
To bring up that point, Keith, is great, because there'll be stuff that we didn't think of.
Right.
So,
right.
And if during the discussions you want to move the construction of that facility to an earlier time, we can have that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe what we'll do, if we have that discussion and come up earlier, then maybe we should budget funds to find an architect for a design of it. And then we got to identify land where we're going to build it.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the discussions we can keep moving
Right.
with.
Marianne,
Mm.
it's Martha.
Yes. Yep.
I think I'm not sure. Do we need clarification on the school? I'm not sure everybody's aware of all of the things that have been going on in Rhode Island with the schools the last couple of years, and that it's not necessarily as negotiable as people might think. All of the ride restrictions.
Well, I'm not sure. Mike, do you want to run with that? I'm not sure what Martha's asking about the restrictions. I know we have to have the 5-year facility plan in place.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. The things that RIDE is requiring.
Yeah, RIDE requires, in order to get the reimbursement of the funding, you need to have a 5-year facility plan approved by RIDE. The approval process takes 6 to 9 months. They have definitive deadlines and timelines to meet in order to get a facilities plan approved. Right now, the school has submitted their letter of intent. It was approved and said, go ahead, do a stage 1. They finalized the stage 1. They're finally working on a stage 2. That stage 2 application is due, if I'm not mistaken, mid-September. What they need to include in that information is demographic information. So they would hire a demographer to determine student populations going forward, and that student population, the amount of kids need to match the infrastructure of the building. They may be a little more flexible with us because we only have the one building. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Mike.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. So speaking to what Ms. Ball said, yes, in addition to what Mary Ann just outlined, which is all accurate, stage 1 has been submitted, stage 2 is mid-September. RIDE has regulations, so one of the biggest numbers on our request is to replace the HVAC system throughout the building. As many of you probably know, the building has 3 separate heating systems now. This would replace all of that into one system, and there's air quality requirements that you have to do to meet RIDE requirements. There's a noise cap, so unit ventilators in rooms can't be louder than a certain amount. You have to follow clean air protocols in order to get the reimbursement. So I think those are some of the restrictions you're talking about, Ms. Ball.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. I think we did go over them at the meetings we've had with the school committee, but that was probably a while ago.
Yeah, it's a good process. It's very intensive, and the RIDE requirements are there for a reason. So you have a quality product when you're done, but there's quite a few hoops to jump through.
And aren't we further down the list? I listen to Newport Radio. That's one of the reasons I know so much about this. And Rogers was I think the top of the priority list to replace the school. And I don't think we were as high up as we would hope to be for numbers.
Correct. They only approve so many projects a year. This would be the Elementary and Secondary Board of Education. So our stage 2 application will go after we submit it, will go before them in September to get on the list. But I can tell you from the people I've talked with at RIDE, because of COVID and everything that's happening, they're really trying to work on air quality in buildings. So they're trying to, I don't want to say jump the line, but they're bending over backwards to help districts.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
Real quickly, Mary Ann, my assumption is, obviously, we're going to go through this. We're going to then have the next 4 weeks of budget meetings, where I assume the department heads will talk through each one of the departments. And I assume that we will review this sort of as an ongoing document, like you said, somewhat living, that even afterwards. So it may be that, getting back to Keith's question, it may be that suddenly we all become enlightened about a certain subject and realize that should be on there or shouldn't be on there or whatever. So I'm assuming that through the budgeting process, this will continue to be adjusted. Is that right?
Correct. And keep in mind, even during the course of any year, if there's an opportunity, that may change, or we may come to you, Amy and I may come to you, there's an opportunity and we think this is a good opportunity and we need to, although we looking to do this 3 years down the road, it's ripe to do it now. So even though it's a plan and everything's in boxes, like I said, it's a planning document subject to change. I think Amy wanted to add something. No.
I had a question for Mike, but I'll get him later.
I have just a quick technical question, Amy, if you don't mind. The bonds for 2 questions actually. The bonds for broadband when they're issued. Is there a component of that issue that contemplates our debt service being picked up by monthly fees? Does that change the payback schedule at all, or do we prepay with, use the revenues from the individual homeowners and businesses to defease the bonds more quickly, or how does that work?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
And it's a bit of a moving target. In order to make sure we could fully fund the project, we wanted the commitment and authorization for the entire potential cost. There will be recovery of costs because some of those expenses are first year operating or initial infrastructure where there is a recovery component. We are still holding out for outside funding as well.
Right.
And that's one reason I haven't gone to market with those because that's still on the table. And so it will not be the full 8 million that ultimately is borne by the taxpayer. But exactly how those numbers shake out is still, I would say, a couple months away.
Right. But the way the graph works is the most conservative
Exactly.
Right.
scenario. Gotcha.
Yes.
The
Always
other
worst
question
case.
the other question I had is around the Block Island Land Trust. So I've seen a couple of these debt service and bonded indebtedness graphs, and the land trust is always sort of joined at the hip with us, if you will. And I assume that's because their bonds are backed by our full faith and credit. Is that right?
They are ultimately,
Okay.
and that's a part of their enabling legislation.
Right. Okay.
There's another layer to that question, which is you often see the land trust included. You often see sewer and water debt excluded, even though they are also backed by the full faith and credit of the town. That's because third parties, rating agencies, investors are used to sewer and water funds. They know how those work, and they can exclude them and understand the mechanisms. The land trust is a bit of a unique animal, although there are certainly more and more than there were when it was first established. And so again, it presents the most conservative view of the town's finances to a third party. Ultimately, all of those are treated the same and with the town as a backstop, and they each pay their debt service out of their own fees. But there is a little bit of a presentation difference just because the land trust is a little bit unusual to the outside world.
Great. Do we have some kind of inventory of our physical infrastructure? You know, is that maintained somewhere where, you know, I'm just thinking about I keep coming back to it, but I just remember last year the conversation like around the garage doors at the fire barn, where, you know, it was potentially dangerous, you know, if I recall correctly, to, you know, pull up those big garage doors or put them down or something. Like the front of the building was shaking when you did that. Do we have that? Is that kind of inventory maintained somewhere, or is it in the plan? You see what I'm?
Marianne, do you want to tackle that, or you want me to field that?
Yeah, so the garage door was in the, what I call the pay-as-you-go capital plan from last year.
Gotcha.
We've had an architect out there. The architect said, I want to get a structural engineer out here. So the structural engineer has been out there also. Sam is fading out, and my last thing to Sam was finalize what we need to finalize on the fire department garage door so we can get it out to bid.
I just happened to think of that
ago.
one. I just happened to think about that one. I'm assuming that, you know, among the professionals, there is this kind of basic knowledge that, oh, jeepers, we're going to have to replace X, you know.
So the town does have a system called FMX, which is a facilities management software that is being populated. You know, it's in process, I think is fair to say. No.
It's new.
It's new. It's new, yes. So it's being populated with the town assets. I think the last written document, we have some physical inventory for insurance purposes. And then the LCAS, of course, did their work several years ago. And that was pretty thorough. But it's still being aggregated in an updated form where you can plan those things out visually over time.
And Keith, just for your knowledge, or sorry, if it's okay, Andre, FMX was sort of an output of that LCAS, and actually Sam's position, even because a number of years ago, maintenance wasn't really thought of that way in capital planning or buildings and stuff like that. So, and I know Amy was very involved in it. And this is a big step so that one can see 5 years, yes, those windows are probably going to need to be repaired
Mm.
or whatever it may be.
That's terrific. Is there anything that keeps you guys awake at night on the capital side? You know, like, oh my God, we need to do that, or I'm worried about that, or I don't mean to put you on the spot. If there's nothing offhand, that's fine. But my bet is you guys, my hope is that you guys know a lot more about kind of what's coming down the pike than we do. You know?
I think to answer your question, and there's a couple of things that keep me awake at night as it relates to capital budget. And I'm going to exclude the school at this point. Obviously, and I've been talking to
Clearly
folks
the
about
IT
this.
infrastructure.
That I think I have that under control somewhere else. But anyway, obviously the employee housing, I think we all know that and hear that. The second piece is and I'm going to lump it together as the public safety. I did walk around the police station with Chief Moynihan. Originally, I thought we may need a new public safety complex, but I don't think that anymore. I think the police station is in pretty good shape, and Matt also agreed with me. The fire station is a different animal. I think if something was to keep me awake at night, it's that infrastructure that they have in place. The bays, based on new vehicles coming in, are not large enough. There's a lot of thing about that infrastructure. I guess would kind of keep me up at night, or think that we really need to look at that. And that dovetails into the equipment also, with some of the equipment they have with the fire and the rescue. So it's basically those two things. The transfer station, the composting, no. The some of the other stuff you see in capital, not as much.
Okay. I just have one. I'm sorry.
I thought Sven.
Mine isn't a question, but I just wanted to say thank you to Andre and Sven and Martha and Mark and Amy and Marianne for me for an hour on this, because it's just for someone who's new, like, it's just very helpful. So thank you. Nobody probably.
Unfortunately,
Sorry.
can't hear much of what Keith was saying.
No, I think he was saying nice things
Yeah.
about us, and I didn't hear it.
I was saying
Send the memo. You're breaking up, Keith.
thank you to you, Martha, to everybody, because I feel like this. Okay, thank you.
I think what Keith said is he'll fund the whole fire department.
I was just saying thank you.
I appreciate that, Keith. You're frozen. That's okay. If anybody else have any comment, I have a couple. Go ahead, Sven.
Go ahead. Or Andre, I do think, I don't know how you want to proceed on going down through this list and stuff, but I hope at some point we can talk about what's some of the line items if we have questions at some point.
And I have a couple technical questions.
Go ahead, Martha.
Well, first of all, the capital improvement ordinance that we have here, did that ever get changed? I don't think it did it?
No, that's why we're reminding you. And just so you know, once we get through this budget cycle, because the next month, that's what we're going to focus on, I will get this on the agenda so we can go through and changing it. What I would like to do is get the planning board's feedback before I formally do that. So when we give them the budget, that's what we do. So to answer your question, no, it has not been, the amendment has not gone through and it has not been adopted.
I think I remember when we first had the capital budget, and that's kind of when everything started to go to hell, because everybody put in everything in the universe that they possibly could ever want. So, the pool was thrown up, the pool was being pushed out 30 years ago, I think it was. And I guess the example that was brought up earlier. So that's great. Good. That's not dead. That's good to know. And the other, I just felt, going back to what we were talking about earlier with the general debt obligation, I think no matter where the sources of funding come from, absent something that's coming from the state, I don't want to. This is how we get ourselves in trouble. We say, oh, so I'm old enough that I remember when the dispatch center was going to be paid for by the fees for fire alarms. Now, both people who made that presentation are dead. So and clearly that was not anything that ever came close to reality. So I think we really have to be realistic, conservative, whatever word you want to use, and look at the big numbers and stop trying to pare it down with, oh, this is coming from somewhere else, this is coming from somewhere else. And we've all, also, of course, is the legal ceiling, which you don't like to even talk about.
Thank you, Martha. I know we're talking, I was kind of hoping to come out of this meeting with an understanding of where the town's debt is now. With the things that we have, Amy, it's your graph. It's the graph, the existing general obligation debt, including land trust and excluding sewer and water, as you explained. I think it's important as we go through. I think it's important as we go into the next budget season that everybody has a firm idea. Yeah, that picture.
I have some questions on that, Andre.
Okay, but I think if Amy, if you could touch on that and just explain that in layman's terms, we're going to spend probably what 10, 12, $15 million this year going into the budget season. Maybe that's generally the 15. But just I really would like to have a discussion about that's this year's expenses to make the town run for a year. But as I look at this, like we have debt service that goes on and on until 2038. There's a lot, on the 21, 22, 23 side. So could you just explain that? Because I think it's important when people come to us with capital projects to realize this is in addition to what's already on the books. You know what I'm saying? Thank you.
Because we do long-term financing for some of those big projects. Hopefully we only do it for the big ones. And so these are the bonds that are currently outstanding for the town. And you can see it's got a pretty good drop off. The town's maturity picture is actually very favorable when you look at this compared to other communities. We, except for sewer and water, don't issue more than 20-year bonds. We've moved to issuing 10-year bonds. So actually 93% of the town's debt will be paid off in the next 10 years. That might feel scary, but it's actually a great position for a community to be in. So you can see a pretty big drop off there as we go to 2022. And then another step down in 2025. And then a major step down in 2031. Final maturity there in 2038. This is, again, just what's outstanding today, but it starts to give you a visual picture of if you needed to issue or elected to issue or pay out of pocket for some of these items where you are building, where you have capacity opening up, if you can wait that long.
Right.
Andre,
Go ahead, Sven.
Amy, though, it's really the next chart, page 2.
Can we,
that is.
Ben, can we stay on that chart? Can we stay on this chart first?
Hold on one second, Mark. Hold on one second. Amy, page 2, which has page 1 embedded in it, plus payoff, is really the current based on broadband and roads, right? I mean, no, go back.
One more.
That one.
No.
The chart.
Page 2.
It's page 2.
There.
There you
There
go.
you
That's,
go.
that's the real world, isn't it? From what has been quote unquote approved.
Yes, so
Yes.
this is going to be, again, a conservative view of what the town has outstanding and upcoming, things that have already been approved, the projects are underway. So this is where you add in the gray section, and this is a combination of $8 million of broadband and $2 million of road projects. So you can see, especially on the tail end, it fills in that gap a lot more, because each of these projects in the current environment will likely be 20-year bonds. It's just what's most marketable today. The trade-off in the interest rate makes it still more favorable to take the longer term. But, you know, so it's still got some of the same patterns of step downs, but it obviously adds a significant bump in 2022, has the same step downs that were there before, and makes a much longer tail. So this is, I would say the first chart is history. This is present time, looking towards the future.
Worst case.
Worst case, yep, because again, there will be some, we hope to not have to issue 8 million for broadband. We hope to be able to, one, recover some funds, we won't count those, but also secure some of that outside funding.
Thank you. Sorry, Mark. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mark.
No problem. I guess, Amy, we could probably use either chart or either graph. What causes those dramatic drops in those 3 time spans? Is it one thing individually, or can you identify those items?
Yes, usually it's going to be project specific. So for example,
or 22 or 23.
The maturity in 2022 is final payoff of the Hodge project. So that was a 20-year issuance, $4.5 million, joint project of the Land Trust and the town and the conservation groups. That project will be paid in full, and it comes off the books in its entirety.
Okay, and 26.
25, 26, you've got mostly the school project. It was in a couple different issuances, but that's primarily the school. And then around 2030 is where you have the town hall renovation and expansion. Old Harbor is in that one as well. The timing it's smaller, so it's a little harder to see, but you can see those major projects coming off.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Amy. And the last question is, using that same graph on the first one, what percentage of our debt is land conservation related? Give or take, percentage.
I don't know that I have that available right now.
Okay.
I'll get you that number.
I'm just thinking because there's not a lot of land left. So this probably won't be as paramount an issue.
Let me answer your question with words instead of a number. Well, I get that, which is that as Hodge comes off, there's the only conservation debt here is going to be Land Trust, and they've done, I think, only about $4 million since Hodge. So it's a much smaller component once Hodge is paid off. This is really buildings and infrastructure primarily.
Amy, what about the land across the National?
Yeah, those are, I don't want to say smaller, but they were, and they're wrapped into the 2009, 2010 timeframe.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Anybody?
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. I think it's a good question. Thanks for Amy for
But
answering.
I do think we have to bear in mind when the town started doing conservation projects, there wasn't another player. There wasn't the Land Trust. Nature Conservancy wasn't as big a player out here. That all has evolved since then. Because we used to do a lot more, but there was a lot less being done overall. That has to be taken in context, I think.
I just want to make sure Keith Stover is here.
Yes, I am.
Okay, I saw.
I switched to my phone because for some reason our internet was collapsing. So
For some reason.
thank
yeah.
you, Andre. Yeah,
You're welcome. I see.
it's clearly Amy's fault. I wish she'd issue those bonds.
The other thing
My
is, just so you know, in your order report on page 46 and 47, it lists all the date, the original issue, the fiscal year was issued, the interest rates, the maturity and stuff like that. So you'll be able to, if you know, Amy rattled off what's fallen off and stuff like that, but at least there you can see it. Also, it does the general obligation, then it does the sewer and water.
Right.
So if you go 46 through 48 it's all the debt information.
Sven, do you have a question?
Yeah, just real quickly, just to get this in, because I hope at some point we'll go through the report, at least bucket by bucket. But I noticed there's no funding now in for the new Harbor Vision Plan or study. Can you help me if that's in somewhere else or what the thought is?
I think the actual vision plan, I think that's like a $40,000 or $50,000 item.
20.
I thought that was a smaller dollar item. Yeah.
It's 20.
So that would not be in this capital. That would be in what I call the operating capital budget.
Can somebody remind me why we took that out of there, Amy? I know we.
Amy
Sure.
could handle that one.
There were
in
a
there.
couple of things that happened all at once. This was at the end of Ed's tenure, so one sort of fell off in transition. Two, we had budgeted $25,000 for that, and we secured an engineering firm to do the work, and their estimate was closer to, as Marianne said, $40,000 to $50,000. And it hasn't really had the traction to move forward. And so as part of last year's budget, I don't want to say crisis, but challenges, that money was released back. And if it needs to be put back on the radar, that's exactly the type of conversation we have here.
Right. So if I can, Andre, I remember this conversation very well, Amy, that you and I had during that quote unquote crisis. And that was, or at least I lobbied hard to get it back and talked about the importance and especially now with Champlin's sale, I think this study is probably one of the most important studies that we have, given all the pressures between Champlin's potentially new housing development and the boat basin. We've got to figure this out. We know how bad it's been in the last few years, and it won't get better. So I would hope we can get this back in the capital plan. Actually, I'd like it in the plan for this year.
I'm sorry, Sven, you asked about the new Harbor Vision study, right? This
Yes, I did.
Yeah, okay.
The second line in community planning.
No, I see. I saw the old harbor in there too, and
Yep.
I remember the new harbor or the discussions on the new harbor. If you want to discuss this document now, I mean, I'm actually fine with that. If that's what the council wants to do quickly.
I have a follow-on to Sven's point, maybe a bit broader, and that is, we're working on bus/jitney/shuttle. I think there is probably pretty universal acknowledgement of traffic issues, certainly downtown, and when you drive by the corner by Bimmy and Paynes and a couple of other spots, it seems to me that we ought to include some money on the capital side for real infrastructure planning, traffic planning, of some sort, because I think a broader picture of going kind of from emergency to emergency on our traffic issues, I think really makes some sense. And I think there are a lot of times, I know Marianne you've thought a lot about this. One day you hear Chapel Street should be cut off to the corner of Weldon's Way,
Weldon's Way.
or Weldon's Way should be pedestrian only. I have no. This is not my area of expertise, to say the least. But it seems like we're going to have to be making some policy decisions around traffic flow. What infrastructure is required to manage traffic flow, and some of those things could be as simple as putting up one-way signs. Others, could involve substantial investment by the community. So it seems to me that having someone, hiring someone who can do a traffic plan and has done perhaps similar plans for tourist economies would really make some sense. And it's, I agree with Sven 100% on, we're likely to see some major changes in that stretch of New Harbor from, as I say, kind of Bimmy around up past Champlain's. And, I also think we need to do the traffic planning associated with that.
Can I ask Keith a follow-up question or just make a comment?
Absolutely.
I think what I'm hearing from you is traffic planning, and you also mentioned possibly, which I probably will be coming to the council as a test to close down Chapel Street from Water Street to Weldon's Way for this summer to try that. I want to talk to Chief Monahan about that and get some input from him before I formally come forward with that with you. But that I think is one of the next thing I will be coming forward to you with. So I hear you, but I also think we need to look at Weldon's Way also, not only strictly from a traffic standpoint, but even though I look at Weldon's Way, I think of what I'm calling the downtown area. So I'm not looking at strictly at traffic from that. I'm just even looking for the flow of people, things like benches, lighting.
Yeah.
There's a whole litany of stuff I think of, and not just traffic. So I think what I'm hearing to do both New Harbor and Old Harbor, doing the same thing with them.
Yep.
Is that what I'm starting to hear?
I think so. First of all, Marianne, I agree with you 100%. I put it under the heading of traffic, but I don't just mean vehicles. I mean moving people, which I think was, the bottom line on the work that you and we are doing on Jitney. It's about moving people in an efficient way, and but you're right, that's not just traffic. And I think we all could see Weldon's Way being a beautiful pedestrian way potentially. There's all kinds of possibilities there, I think. So yes, I agree with you 100%. I wanted to raise it, but I didn't want it to take away from the New Harbor study, which I also think is not only important but probably urgent. Would be not too strong a word given the changes we're seeing there. I mean, look, the company that bought the boat basin, they're not done. I mean, they have a significant piece of property there, and I can't imagine they're done there. With just upgrading the docks. And I don't know what they're contemplating, but I think we have to have a nimble, comprehensive but nimble plan to, so that we are sort of establishing what our priorities are, what our ground rules are, what our investment strategy is going to be, and not reacting to proposals that are made by developers.
Thank you, Keith. There is a plan out of the boat basin that they for small construction in there.
Oh, is there? I wasn't. Gotcha.
The council got it at one point, but
Gotcha.
I'm sure you can pick one up at town hall.
Yeah. Thank you.
Some improvements to the property.
This is the one that's been before HDC. It's
Well, there we go.
just for the building, but they showed on it also revision of traffic flow, revision of parking, rather significant groundwork changes. And it says right on it, phase 1. And that's been before historic district. Already, that was. I don't know. Nothing seems to. Well, anyway, it's around.
Thank you.
I've mentioned it before.
Anybody else?
One more?
Go ahead, Sven.
Sorry, I'm looking at more line items, thinking about this strategy and vision. And again, I know, to Martha's comment, at least in the study or the thing we heard from the boat basin, was that there's going to be an office for the harbor master, and they're going to maintain the ability to do shellfish and all that there. I see that the Construct Harbors Facility Boardwalk is now zeros. That obviously had some big numbers years ago. It's gone up and down depending. I guess my question is, as we move forward, should that be in the budget or not, with a high probability that we'll probably need something. So it was clearly removed. I don't think that removed from the budget. I don't think it removes the need for it. It's just a matter of maybe there's a better, more efficient private partner, public, effort. But I guess I just want to make sure that we don't lose that need. And right now it's zeros.
Yeah, as Marianne said, this is a
Oh, it's good. I'm not worried. Oh yeah. No, no negative.
Amy, go ahead.
And Marianne might slap me later, but because we haven't talked about this, but I can envision.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I need to be updated. I'm like, oh, I'm going to call Amy. Just tell me what this is about.
What's a boardwalk?
No.
It's
a more general.
Zeros.
We're building a casino.
And keeping the line there with nothing against it obviously serves a function. But I think the document in its entirety could benefit from, like as Sven, I think it was Sven said earlier, a list of things that didn't make the list because they were clearly chosen not to, and or a list of items for future consideration, meaning there's not enough visibility to talk about the timing or the dollars associated with a particular project, but we know it someday we may have to confront it. I think the Harbor Master office is one like that. Yep. And whether that's just shown with a line item with no numbers or whether there are words, I think keeping track of those things is important part of this document.
What in a past life, one of the things I have done in the past was to have a whole separate column way over to the right, which was sort of a, don't forget me column, and that you could put a number in there, even though it didn't really roll into the 5 or 8 until it was pulled in, if that makes sense. So but I'll leave it to you and Marianne how to do that, but I think it's an important thing, just so we have visibility to it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Anybody else comments on any of this?
I just wanted to follow up on one thing Martha asked and I still wasn't clear about, and that is this proposed ordinance that you sent us, Marianne. Now, are we still operating under the old system? These edits have not been made. You're suggesting that we make them. You're going to consult with planning, but as far as the capital plan right now, do we have some existing responsibility, or does the planning board have some existing responsibility?
So we kind of are operating under hybrid model, I guess, for lack of a better term. The piece that's the hybrid, and it's my understanding that the planning board was okay with this, is that the town manager, and this started under Ed, took the lead on moving forward with the documentation, meeting with the department heads, some of the type of work that is probably, I don't want to say cumbersome, but probably cumbersome for a planning board. And what we'll do is we will then submit this to the planning board for them to review, as it states in the very last, it says it says mandatory, but it's going to be referred to the planning board for their input as relates to the, yeah, right there. It's the last page, I think, for the ordinance, for their referral, and to ensure it's compliant with the comprehensive plan.
Terrific. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Andre, I realize we're going to dissect this more and more as we go along. Quick question on the health services. In the next 2 years, they're asking for some $28,000 for improvements. Was that request kind of made before the presentation we had the other night about expanding the medical center? Is this $28,000 just for simple Band-Aids until such time? Or can it be kind of delayed until hopefully there is reconstruction?
So Amy, do you want to run with that one? Because it's my understanding, and I could be wrong, that there is some, although they're doing major renovations, there's other maintenance work because it's our building that we are required to do. So is that correct, Amy? She's still here?
She is.
She's connecting, okay. I don't know. Amy, did you hear what I just said?
Yes,
I
she
did.
is.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, did we lose you? The plane, the helicopter?
You need the question again, Amy? It's kind of a pedestrian figure, but I was wondering, with the long-term goals, do they have to do it?
Yeah, I think she keeps fading out.
So I think I missed enough that I don't understand the question.
All right, under health services for the next 2 years, they're asking for $20,000 and then $8,000 for improvements.
Mhm.
We were presented a grand plan to expand the health center recently. Do these improvements have to be done, or can that be delayed until that grand plan takes shape?
My understanding is that that's broken into two components. Some of it relates to the Davidson House, which would be separate. And then the 20,000 is what they're asking for the town to contribute as what they think are our obligations relative to the building as they do the larger project. Marianne, do you think that's fair to say?
That's pretty much what I said.
Okay.
I said there's some parts of that it's because our building, it's some of the stuff we need to do the maintenance of that facility. And that's what I said to them. And I said, I think that's my understanding of it.
Now,
And that's what historically has been done.
Yeah, the fact that we're not able to fund all of that in 22, they may be willing to pick up the cost since they're doing their project anyway.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Is it the council's pleasure to go through this document line by line tonight? If so, we should just get going. No, okay, good. Because I know some of those numbers have changed and whatnot. What I do want to comment on is potential employee housing initiatives. That's coming up a lot lately, especially with staff the town has and has in the future. So I, just keeping an eye on that. I see by 2024, we got 1,500,000 and 1,500,000 Faulkner and Stacia renovation. I think that's going to be one of those things that's going to be moving up. And if we are talking about moving fire and keeping police there, I think maybe we should start thinking about maybe what we're going to do with the fire barn after fire barn's out. Well, I think it'd be a great place for housing, but just potential employee housing. That's going to be a big number, I think, in the next coming years, just to staff our town positions, especially with the new public works director inevitably coming in. So I just wanted to mention that. I mean, it's a community thing too. So anybody else have any comments about? Sven, do you have enough to share with all of us?
I do. There's a brand new goldfish, by the way.
Damn.
I guess the only thing, Andre, I would say is I would love to figure out in the next 4 weeks, and thanks Millie for sending out that note about the budget meetings. But I'd love to figure out when's the best for Amy and Marianne. How do we revisit this? Not necessarily, well, maybe line by line, but more importantly, bucket by bucket, or to the earlier comments, is there something missing? Like, what's the process to live this? And there's no, whatever they want to do.
So a couple of ways. As I said, the next month we'll be going through the budget process. We have different work sessions, and different work sessions we're looking at different budgets. I have some takeaways from this evening that I hear from you folks already. What I'm hearing is the Old Harbor and New Harbor plan. And I'm hearing you want that done sooner than later. So I'm hearing that you're looking to have that in 2022. So what we'll do is we can update this. We can have another discussion on this. I think it's in a work session. Amy and I can walk away with what we heard from you, update this document and highlight, we're hearing this, we'll put this in, and then go from there. If there's something specific you would like to see us move up, move back, whatever, that we heard some of that this evening, and then we can discuss that further at at another budget work session.
That good, son?
Thank you.
Keith, do you have any more questions or clarification?
No, I froze while I was trying to say this before, but I just wanted to thank you, Andre, and Sven, Martha, Mark, Marianne, Amy, et al. For someone who's new to this was really, really helpful and just thoughtful, and the data are terrific and the graphics are excellent. It just it makes me it really, thank you so much. I appreciate, really I feel like I demanded a lot of people's time, and I just appreciate it so much. So thank you.
No, thanks for asking.
Yeah, no, especially if it's been that helpful. That's important.
Yeah.
That's good feedback to hear, because as we get new counselors going forward, these are things we need to hear.
Thank you. And
I think the exercise is invaluable before we get the budget presented to us, just so we know and where our debt is for the next, I don't have in front of me, but for the next considerable amount of years before we, ask for the $3 million project. I'm excited for Monday when we get our budget.
Andre, just one last thing, and Marianne and I did talk about this. I would, at some point, Marianne and Amy, I would love to have a little bit of historical perspective on exactly what Andre just talked about. And that is, when the sewer was built, it was a huge amount of money relatively. And I think at a present day value, that expenditure, if you look at debt load, it might be more than this, or town hall. And because I think when people start to see these numbers, or they see the debt load, there's going to be understandable observations. And I just want to try and put it in some realm of history. Like, I know the numbers are big, but so is our revenue stream, et cetera. And I think a relative understanding of it, that, Armageddon is not upon us, that then, as Amy said earlier, we're in really good financial shape as a town. I think that will help as we get into the financial town meeting and into the budget process. So would love if Marianne and Amy could help us with that or help the citizens with that. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Sven. Amy, so I can understand these documents better. Page 4 of the graph pages with the words. So takeaway on this meeting today, the total bonded debt the town has right now. Is that 31,804,666?
That's the total that you've committed to. Like you said, I haven't issued it all, but that's what you've committed to today.
Perfect. Okay. So the town is committed to $31 million in debt right now, bonded debt. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. Appreciate it. That helps.
And Andre, that's really my point of the historical reference, because that's a huge number in my mind. And I think many people would say, oh, start joking on my fish. But I don't know whether 31 million in today's dollars is bigger, scarier than sewer, town hall, all past projects. And I think I want to try and calm nerves, because we all get excited about big numbers.
And Sven, I will hopefully have this ready for the public to digest. It just takes a while to clean up and put together, but
oh no.
But the cut to the chase answer is, just as a milestone, is that when the town brought on the school project, its debt service as a percentage of the total budget was the highest that it's ever been, pushing about 18-20%. Even some of the projections that we've talked about just get us to that point for about a year or two. So we've significantly come down from our peak, and I'd be happy to show some of that historical against what we're looking at going forward.
Thank you.
That'd be great.
And that's usually the case. A new building like the school, any kind of major school stuff, is the big, I mean, we talked about the sewer treatment plants, but it's usually the schools that are the ones that have a high bonded debt, understandably so. They're large buildings and stuff like that.
And for this town, it was really the first of those projects that we had undertaken. So it came on a very small operating base.
Thank you.
You have to remember, when you're looking back at figures, you need to talk the way Amy's talking about percentages, not against the grand list, because we had reval. And the first year we had reval, the taxes went from, I think, $75 a thousand to $8 a thousand, which is only meant that the property had been greatly undervalued. So you go back before that, you start playing with numbers. Nothing's going to mean anything unless you stick with the kind of comparison Amy just gave you.
Good point.
Thank you, Martha. Mark?
And go back to what you said earlier. You're excited, Andre, to roll up our sleeves and start on Monday. Well, I'm excited we're doing that with an outstanding finance department. Amy and the whole gang, you guys have been terrific.
We wouldn't be here without them. That's for damn sure. All right. Anybody else? Anybody from the public have any comments? I see. Yes, Kristen Bauman, Library Director. Kristen.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Yes, always my hat is off to Amy and all the town employees. So I just want to be clear about when is appropriate for the department heads to speak, and would you like comment now, or should we attend planning board? Marianne is right. The process has changed over the last few years. Ed approached it differently than we had in some time. And so I just want to be clear on that. I'm sorry if you went over that, but I'm just finishing up my work day, and I was, doing a couple of things at once when you started. So, but you have my full attention now. We're closed.
Yeah, our budget season. Hold on one second. I can tell you. You mean general discussions about what we're having tonight, or general discussions about your budget? Because Millie said schedule.
No, yes. So I have the budget I have the budget meetings. I received that email. I just didn't know if you wanted to talk about capital during that process, or if you wanted us to, I think I heard that this document is going to the planning board. We used to also be required to go to the planning board and defend our request. I didn't, so I guess it's specifically about capital, and if you'd like to hear any comments now as a department head or something else.
Amy and Mary Ann, I will defer to you on that.
I'm trying to find the schedule. Hang on.
Oh, I have the
It's on the
schedule.
April 24th.
It's March.
That's right, March 24th. Thank you.
March.
March 24th is a library at 4 o'clock.
Right, and I think what Kristen's asking is, how does she get there? Does she go to capital? Does she go to planning, or does she go to the town manager? I think she's asking about the ordinance. Am I correct with that, Kristen?
So,
She's muted.
so Kristen, we met with you, Amy and I met with you and discussed your capital budget with you, correct?
She's muted. Give her a second.
So final part.
Yes,
Yes, she is.
I think I'm unmuted again. Yes, you met with me, and now we're not budgeted for what our request was. And so I'm wondering if I'll have an opportunity to speak to that request, or speak to the council in general about our request. And as about our request is about maintaining a town facility. And our request was to reshingle and replace the windows in the building. And we're moving ahead on phase 2 of that project, and it's not funded. And so I'm concerned. I'm curious. I'm wondering how to proceed. And I understand the budget process. I've been through the budget process, as you all know, for many years, but the capital budgeting process has changed. So my question is specifically about capital. We used to go to the planning board and defend our capital requests. And if you're telling me you want me to just do that at the operating budget meetings, that's fine. I just need a clarification on that.
Right, and thank you for that question. Can Mary Ann or Amy?
Yeah, the capital budget, that's why I wanted to pull out the documents, and correct me if I'm wrong, Amy, as to how you folks have done it in the past. I have on March 17th, budget work session with the town council. And at that point, we're going to be reviewing admin, finance, fire rescue, EM, emergency management, police, highways, harbor, buildings, recreation, GIS, technology, boards commission, and capital improvement and debt service. So I would, as I understand, at least that's what I'm understanding, is the comments will be made at that point on the 17th. Is that different than what you folks have done?
Go ahead, Amy.
Given that we've had this discussion today and there are some takeaways for us to come back with, I would imagine that we may end up revisiting capital a little bit later in the process, even though it's listed on, because I think the council needs to hear some of the other things and then get a chance to get in detail. So I again, it's specifically listed on the 17th, but and that would be the place as it's identified today, but I wouldn't be surprised if we revisited it later in the process as well.
Yeah, Amy and I talked about we may see some additional work sessions towards the end of March based on what's going on. I mean, that was before we even got into this discussion.
Right, and I think
so.
It was, I don't want to say last minute, but this document made it out to the world before the formal presentation of the budget, so it will probably change a little bit as that final submission gels.
So, okay, so Kristen's asking if she needs to go to the planning board this year for her budget, for her capital budget. I think. And I think I'm hearing the answer is no.
No,
Okay. Kristen, is that
that's what
correct?
I'm thinking.
Kristen, is that correct question and
Good.
sufficient answer?
Yes, that is my question. Thank you. I appreciate the clarifying of it. And I just heard no, and just in response to Marianne's question, no, that's not how we've always done it. We did go to planning for many years
Right.
and talk about capital budgets, and then they put forth a capital budget, and then planning came to the council. So it is a new system, and I'm just clarifying the system and how you'd like department heads to participate.
So,
And so it sounds like it's, again, a new system. We don't need to go to planning. Although that makes me very concerned, because planning board will be receiving this document, which has no capital money for the library for shinglings and a window project that's ongoing, and won't hear from me about why that's so important. But if that's the process, I guess that's the process. And then we'll discuss it at the town council level. It's very disconcerting to me.
So let's clarify a couple. And Kristen, you just mentioned that you weren't in the meeting in the beginning, so you missed the introductory that I provided the council with the capital budget. And I won't go through the details of, at this point, that it is a planning document. It's subject to change. I also stated to the council that one of the documents that we did give them this evening is a amendment to the ordinance as it relates to the capital improvement. And what I stated at that point was, this year, what we did, which is also my understanding was done by Ed Roberge, is the capital, the lead on the capital budget process was taken by the town manager. It's my understanding previously you would submit stuff to the planning board. We decided it's been moved to the town manager. Town manager met with the finance director, with all the department heads. From there, Amy and I worked on a capital budget going forward. What I said also in the beginning is that there is still language in the ordinance, even with the amended ordinance, that the capital budget will be referred to the planning board, and the planning board, with cooperation and assistance of the town manager, preparation, develop, and review the final capital budget to be sure it's in compliance with the comprehensive plan and things of that nature. We've had a great discussion here this evening. There were a couple of things that the council has come forward and said, I would like to see this included in the capital budget. I would like to see this changed. So when the department heads will have that same opportunity that you had with the planning commission to state, my capital budget does not included in the plan is this. I really think I would like to see this included in the capital plan for these reasons. So the opportunity will be able to do that in front of the council instead of the planning board.
I so appreciate that clarification, and I guess that just loops back to my first question. And so that opportunity will be during the operating budget session on March, I don't know what the library is, I don't have it in front of me, but where the library is listed in the budget session.
I would suggest, based on what's been posted for the meeting, the library operating budget is on the 24th. We do have the capital budget on the 17th. We most likely will be adding work sessions. What I would ask you to do, based on the budget schedule that I think has already been posted, is attend the meeting on the 15th where we're discussing the capital budget, and attend the meeting on the 24th where we're discussing the library operating budget.
I'm sorry, Marianne, is the 17th or the 15th?
17.
17th,
Okay.
right. And the 24th.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Kristen. Anybody else out there? I'm ready to adjourn. I got no questions. If anybody else doesn't have any questions or comments. Thank you, Mary Ann. Thanks, Keith, for bringing this item to us, and Amy too. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Seconded by Sven. All those in favor, Martha?
Aye.
Sven?
Aye.
Keith?
Yes.
And Mark?
Aye.
And I'm also affirmative on that. Motion carries 5-0. I hope you've all got a good education this afternoon. I certainly have. And I appreciate everybody for their efforts. And with that,
Thank you.
thank you.
Enjoy the
Bye.
snowboarding.